Today on Revealing Wholeness, let's get an inside look into the phone conversations with Dr. Troy as he shares his experience, insights, and various topics related to you and your health and wellness. From discussions of the latest medical research to answering common questions that you may have and concerns about your health, this podcast is packed with valuable information for anyone seeking to improve their overall well-being. Whether you're looking for tips on nutrition, fitness, mental health, or general lifestyle advice, join us for the engaging conversation that might just change the way you approach your own health journey. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for an engaging phone discussion with Dr. Troy.
Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Troy, and this is our fourth week in March of 2024, and this is our Food is Medicine. What you may find that is in your cupboard in a pinch that could help you in a time of need, especially if, let's say, power's out or you're far and away, or gosh, let's just not go there, but what if there's a zombie apocalypse? Now, I haven't talked about molasses many times, but molasses is something that really should be in our cupboard all the time. And molasses is a phenomenal substance, and I will explain why. And it likely will dawn on many of you, man, I should be doing this. Maybe my children should be doing this. Yes, the process of acquiring molasses is not a very difficult one. And it comes from when they have sugar cane, when they squeeze the sugar cane itself, and they get all this liquid, they begin to dry it or crystallize the sugar by heating it, and then they pull the crystalline sugar off of it, and they're left with a thickened syrup at the bottom. Well, that first go around in the heating process, what they're left with is what they call light molasses. And that light molasses is a much more mild flavor and still has a significant amount of sugar in it. They'll go through another heating, drying, crystallizing process and scrape all that crystal off, or all that sugar off, and now they're left with dark molasses, and technically unsulfured molasses. Now they will add sulfur to it, which I believe is to help the flavor be toned down a bit. But unsulfured molasses is an excellent thing to be using in and of itself. If you want to go to the third and final step of that drying process where they crystallize it one more time, they're then left with blackstrap molasses. So that would be the most nutrient dense, but it's not an order of magnitude more potent than dark molasses or unsulfured molasses. So I refer people to unsulfured or blackstrap either, if they want something that's fairly nutrient dense. Now, if you may have already kind of put this together, that if you're removing all the sugar out of sugar cane, perhaps what you're left with is everything the body needs to actually process sugar in the body. And you'd be right. You wouldn't be far off by doing a spoonful of molasses to help your children and yourself recover blood sugar balance, which is one of the first things that I would recommend blackstrap or unsulfured molasses for. Molasses in and itself has a ton of calcium and magnesium, iron, trace minerals. It has copper, which is natural vitamin C. It also has a lot of B vitamins. So depending on how difficult they made that heating process is how protected those B vitamins have been to the point of blackstrap molasses. But I find frequently that there's a significant amount of potent B vitamins in blackstrap molasses. So you're going to find that it is excellent for energy. It's excellent for recouping trace minerals into the body. I have read reports where there was a woman who had heavy bleeding from her menstrual cycle, and she did raw apple cider vinegar and molasses, and found that she literally stopped the heavy bleeding within just a few weeks, if not a month. And it might take a couple cycles for some gals out there, but you may find that very helpful. If you have a child who has nosebleeds, to strengthen the blood vessels, often take vitamin C and B vitamins, but most importantly, if we have weak tissues, what is the tissue strengthener? If you've been around listening to my podcast at all, you may have already figured out it's the calcium. And so I'm going to hang my hat more so on the calcium and partly on the iron, partly on the B vitamins, molasses, of why it helps nosebleeds so much. My own anecdotal story, I was living at 8,800 feet, which is Lake Yellowstone Hotel for a summer while I was working there as a pre-college student at age 18. And within about 5 days, I began to have nosebleeds. I knew immediately I needed molasses, but I couldn't get out of the park to a health food store that would carry it because obviously nobody in the park did. And before that, it was miserable. And so I went to the local, they have this kind of dock in a box at the Lake Yellowstone Hotel, and I went there, and what they told me that they could do for me was cauterize my blood vessels of my nose. And I'm thinking, I don't really have an option here. I kind of have to take this medical model, which is ridiculous, but I don't know what else to do. So I said yes. I will tell you, it was definitely not the funnest experience of my life to get the blood vessels inside my nose cauterized. If you know what cauterization is, it's basically burning them. And while it seemed to help for a few days, my nose began to bleed. There was another gal that was there that was having nosebleeds as well. And when I finally got out the west entrance of the park and went to a health food store and got a small bottle of blackstrap molasses, I took a spoonful right when I got it, and I never had another nosebleed the entire summer. I gave some to her, and she was equally impressed. Had I also known back then the makeup of molasses, I would have started doing calcium immediately, though I didn't wait for probably almost 20 years later before I started doing lots of calcium and helping my body in other ways. But I digress. So not only will it help nosebleeds, but it also can be a sports drink. If you think about something like, Gatorade, I'm just thinking, why would you drink high fructose corn syrup and have any inkling that it would add 1 iota to your body? Okay, so they put some salt in it. That may be marginally helpful, but the amount of sugar in it and coloring, it just negates everything else. Now, if you're an athlete and you're very much into nutrition, you're probably not going to appreciate the flavor of molasses because it's very strong, it's very potent. But as athletes, we'll typically do what no one else will do. We will eat things that nobody else will eat. We will do things that nobody else will do. And that's just the nature of an athlete. So if you can tolerate some molasses, let's say a tablespoon in 4 ounces of water would probably be wise with a tablespoon of raw apple cider vinegar, and perhaps a tablespoon of raw honey, you would have yourself an amazing little electrolyte replacement drink. I mean, my goodness, it's got to be 100 times better than anything you would buy on the market in a bottle that has a G on it. So just for ideas. So again, if we find ourselves in the middle of nowhere, or that we now don't have grocery stores and we're in a pickle, you can do quite a bit with molasses. And stay tuned for my bonus podcast, which is on nutritional yeast and raw apple cider vinegar. And we're going to talk about the zombie apocalypse that you may be in and how it can be very helpful. But how it relates is typically they grow the yeast on molasses and therefore makes it very rich indeed as an ingredient to a lot of different dishes, so to speak. So until next time, I hope this information was helpful. If you have any questions, concerns, or comments, or things you would love me to talk about, I would enjoy your feedback. Until next time, I'm Dr. Troy, and remember, there is way more right with you than there is wrong with you.
Thanks for listening. If you have any questions or comments, you can reach Dr. Munson at 360-893-8586 or email him at chiroman@dr.com. That's chiroman@dr.com. Check out our current workshop schedule on Facebook at Infinity Whole Health.
The information on Dr. Troy Munson's podcast is meant to educate the listener and is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent disease.